I don't think there's ever been an administration that has come close to what we've done.
I got a letter that my student loans have been forgiven.
Okay, y'all, I got my student loans forgiven. So he did what he said he was gonna do.
Over $90,000 of my student loans had been forgiven.
What gives Elizabeth Warren a pep in her step?
That nearly 5 million people in America have seen their student loan debt canceled.
Student debt cancellation for 5 million people and counting is quite an amazing accomplishment, particularly for a president who initially said,
"I will not make that happen."
When he was running for president in 2019, Joe Biden proposed a higher education plan that didn't offer any student debt forgiveness. But thanks to persistent public pressure from young people and progressive leaders,
canceling student loan debt is the single most effective executive action President Biden can take.
These young people are leaving school deeply in debt. They're struggling economically. They deserve a break.
Candidate Biden was ultimately persuaded, and at the conclusion of the Democratic primary, he pledged to support debt cancellation for up to $10,000 per borrower. And in August 2022, months before a crucial midterm election, President Biden rolled out a detailed plan.
Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans.
And he even promoted that plan with a video with this guy.
No matter what these Republican officials say, we know student debt relief will make a real difference for people.
43 million Americans would have benefited from it. Unfortunately, the radical right Supreme Court knocked that relief plan down. Thankfully, the Biden administration, especially his Secretary of Education, kept finding other legal avenues to cancel student debt for people.
More than 1 out of 10 people that have student loan have already had their loan forgiven. 1 out of 10. And that's with the Supreme Court striking down our biggest plan.
Now, after years of pressure and despite the Supreme Court sabotage, the Biden administration has managed to cancel billions of dollars in student debt. But honestly, I suspect very few of us know all the specifics about what they've done. So I sat down with Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona and Undersecretary James Quall to better understand the specific details of who has gotten relief and why. It feels like month after month, there seem to be new updates coming from your department about yet another program for debt cancellation. Pull us back. What are the principles that are guiding you here, Mr. Secretary?
Over 1 million people go into a default every year. We don't talk about that. This is about supporting our students and leveling the playing field the way the president asked me to do when he hired me, but it's also about recognizing that education is the foundation of our country's growth. We have to invest in it and fix it if we're serious about making sure America reaches its potential. You know, the banks, when they were falling apart, the federal government had help. We're helping working class people now.
Let's start at the outset. How many total people have received student debt relief as a result of the efforts of this department?
About 4.5 million.
So let's start with this 4.5 million as a global pie chart. How much in total dollars on average do you think that most of these people have received in student debt relief?
Well, it's a total in the order of $150 billion or so. That would be, $25,000, $30,000 a person.
When you think about the biggest pie chart of that 4.5 million, who are those people?
The biggest group are people who were cheated by for-profit colleges or who found their colleges closed. There was an enormous boom in for-profit online education, typically enrolling low-income students, students of color, first-generation college students, and leaving them with very large debts and very poor career prospects. Often there was high pressure or deceptive recruiting that was illegal. And when a student takes out a loan based upon a legal premise, then we are allowed to forgive that loan.
How many total people do you think generally that is?
That's about 1.5 million people.
Walk us through some of the other major components of the recipients who received student debt relief.
Well, another major group are people in public service. And 15 years ago, Congress passed this law saying, if you go into public service, you make payments for 10 years, you work for 10 years, then at the end of that, your loan can be forgiven. But the program was poorly designed. It was administered with indifference. At the start of this administration, only 7,000 people had ever gotten loan forgiveness, and famously the program had a 99% rejection rate.
Why was this happening? Why was the rejection rate that high?
It was a very complicated and somewhat obscure eligibility requirements that people just didn't understand, or they didn't have the help that they needed navigating the program and getting the benefits they were entitled to. I mean, we're talking about teachers, nurses, service members, public sector employees, nonprofit employees. We've cleaned up a lot of the tricks and traps that were keeping people from getting these benefits. We also permanently opened up new repayment plans into the program, so you wouldn't be penalized if you didn't enroll in the right plan right away. And as a result of these changes and other types of changes, the number of people who have gotten public service loan forgiveness has gone from 7,000 to 870,000.
So we've talked about a couple of sets of actors. Are there other categories of people who've benefited?
Yeah, the next category I would mention is people who've been in repayment for 20 or 25 years or longer. The department has long had a program that says pay what you can afford, and after a couple of decades, if you still owe money, we'll forgive the balance, so that student loans don't become a life sentence. In this case, at the start of the administration, only a few hundred people had ever gotten this form of forgiveness. So we were able to give people credit, and as a result, we've forgiven hundreds of thousands of loans for people that, that did their share, that paid their part for many, many years. This was an automatic benefit that we provided, that's really important. And we found that when people have to navigate all these forms and figure it out, they often aren't eligible, even if we know in our own data that they should be eligible.
Do you have a rough sense of how many total people we're talking about who've benefited here?
More than 1 million people.
Are there other programs that you wanted to mention as recipients of student debt relief?
If you have a total and permanent disability, you're eligible to have your student loan forgiven, but we still had them on their books. And in fact, in some cases, they had gone into default and we were garnishing their Social Security payments when the fact that they were even getting those payments meant they were eligible to have their student loans forgiven.
And you came in and helped alleviate it and did it automatically?
That's right. And I really want to emphasize, sometimes people say this is about helping doctors and lawyers.
They're transferring wealth from lower income and middle income people to people of higher income. It's extremely unfair.
The people that we're helping, these are not highly paid individuals. These are people that don't get the financial ROI from their student loan because they're disabled, because they were cheated by a for-profit college, because they're persistently low income over many, many years. So I think there's a real misunderstanding about just how broad the problem of student debt has become in our country and why steps this aggressive are really needed.
To a working class person who says, I didn't go to college, Mr. Secretary, I saw a lot of other people who did and now they're getting their debt forgiven. Why am I, as a working class person, how am I benefiting? What's in it for me here?
Look, this is the administration that's going to make it so that that person can go to college, or that person's children can go to college and have a good return on investment. I don't want my neighbor to go into default because that hurts the community in which I live.
If Donald Trump becomes president, he would eliminate all these student debt forgiveness programs and sabotage the potential for even more borrowers to get relief. And that's only the start. His allies have laid out a blueprint in Project 2025 for abolishing the Department of Education and privatizing student loans. Critics, your critics, they look at what you're doing and they say, I got a solution. Why don't we just abolish the Department of Education?
You're doing a good job for the American people when you're living rent-free in their head and they want to take you out. Now, if we let go and don't have a Department of Education, think about the disparities in this country. Think about what's happening with the privatization of K-12 education, where they're proposing taking Title I dollars and turning it into vouchers. It's going to further exacerbate the haves and the have-nots in this country. We are going to defend public education while they try to defund it.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like this one. And if you ever have any ideas for what More Perfect Union should cover next, please drop them in the comments. Thanks.